Hello and welcome to the athletic orientation video for the 2021-2022 school year. My name is Mike Haugly and I'm the athletic director here at GPL. The purpose for this video is twofold. First of all, it's to go over some important information regarding athletics and activities. And secondly, it's to talk about some specific things that we will be doing for this school year. I'd like to first start with a little bit of our philosophy regarding what we do here for all of our activities. And quite simply, we define it as the Panther Way. We call it the Panther Way. And the Panther Way, obviously addressing our mascot, but more importantly, it's how we function as a program, whether we're talking about sports, whether we're talking about fine arts. It is us trying to live our lives as God expects us to, whether you call that letting your light shine, living your Christian life, etc. It's who we are as God's people. And the Panther Way is something that our various coaches and directors are talking to your students throughout this school year as they apply different things that happen in life to God's Word. It's the essence of who we are, and it's what we get to do as Christians. I would also say, from my side of things, I would also invite you as the parents and the supporters of our student athletes to also adopt this mentality. GPL has a very strong reputation in the community, especially the way that we handle each other, how we deal with certain situations, and it all kind of involves this Panther Way idea. And so thank you for all of you in the past that have done a tremendous job with this, and I look forward to our school continuing that pattern that Christ has set for us as we move into this school year. This Panther Way expectation is of all people involved in athletics, whether that's people inside of our building here or supporters of GPL activities. And as we look at the big picture of how we evaluate sports and activities in the lives of our students as they continue to grow up here in the high school years, it plays a big role. And when they are being reminded of this Panther Way idea by Christian role models to live their Christian lives, that sets them up for a very strong foundation as they move forward in life. And speaking of a strong foundation, I just briefly want to touch on our school theme for the year. It comes from Matthew chapter 7, the famous stories that Jesus shared with his disciples of the man who had his firm foundation on the rock. And when the bad things in life happened, the storms, the wind, it all beat against the house stood because of its firm foundation on the rock. And your students are going to hear all about that throughout the year. Now that we know our foundation is in Jesus, as we have that confident assurance, how does that then apply and play out in our lives in various capacities? And one of those ways can be in activities and athletics. And so your coaches of your activities will implement this concept throughout the year, and certainly they will be hearing more and more about that throughout the chapel services, religion classes, and other things. So our school year theme is Build on the Rock. What types of activities are available to GPL students? Well, we have a large list of different things. Some of them are seasonal, some of them occur throughout the school year. Here are just a list of some of our organized, more sanctioned activities. As you can see, there's a wide variety of sports and other opportunities in the fall, as well as the winter and the spring as well. We have a student body size that is growing, and that's a wonderful thing. We have a large incoming freshman class. My biggest suggestion for students is to try to find ways that they can be involved, whether that is in their favorite activity and the one they look forward to the most, or perhaps that might include reaching a little bit outside of their comfort zone and trying something else. We certainly have a student body size that allows for a large amount of participation in many of our activities, and I would encourage students to look for opportunities to get involved. I do survey the seniors before they graduate, and one of the biggest responses that I get most frequently, if they were to give advice to their freshman version of themselves, involves something about getting more involved that allows you to meet new people, to find your niche, to find talents maybe that you didn't even know you had when you were a freshman in high school. So if you are a freshman and you're looking at this list, perhaps there are multiple things on here that you can try and have an interest in. There are also some things that occur throughout the entire school year. Different student groups. Some of them are tryout based, like an honor choir, and others students get appointed to, like student council and other things like that. And there certainly are other opportunities besides this list, various clubs. We are actually in the middle of conversations about adding some different clubs, so as that information becomes available, we'll let the students know. But lots of opportunities with our various activities here at GPL. Now the next couple slides are specifically for the parents, some information that you want to make sure that you are aware of and where you can find more information in a timely manner as well. The first thing is finding out the schedules for the various activities. There's a couple different avenues that you can go about for that. We do have some printed materials, some posters that perhaps would be showing up at your churches, as well as little wallet inserts that have all of the schedules there as well. The downside to printed out schedules is once they're printed, and any changes obviously don't get reflected on that. And certainly there tends to be changes, whether that's dealing with South Dakota weather or just various changes that happen throughout the year. So these printed schedules may not be the most accurate as time goes on. So just something to be aware of there. If you are looking at a printed schedule, one other thing maybe to note, especially when we play road games at co-op opponents that are maybe a combination of 2 or 3 different towns in the areas, you will oftentimes see one of the towns underlined, and that underlined town is the actual location where the game is going to be played. So it's important to note that so that you end up in the right place at the right time to watch your children participate. If you're looking for maybe a little bit more accurate schedule, especially if changes are made, I would encourage you to continue to consult our Google Calendar that's located at our school website. That gets updated as frequently as possible whenever there are changes, and that might be a more readily available access for you. You can get access to that either on your computer or phone or whatever. So that might be another useful tool to see the events that are upcoming. If you want a more specific short-range version of what's happening at GPL, we send out weekly updates through the emails. And in that weekly update is the 2-week view, where for the next 14 days, every activity is listed there, as well as some other information that you don't necessarily get with the other 2 calendars. For example, what time the bus might be leaving for a road event or things of that nature. So the 2-week view could be another avenue. And again, you can find that in the weekly update that gets sent out towards the end of each week. There's one other way that I want to just quickly mention. There's an app on your phone that you can download. It's called Our School Today. If you look for that app, it's a free app. It has a blue baseball cap as its logo with the letters RST. That's another way that you can keep tabs on our schedules for the various activities. And you'll also have a way that you can get notified of changes. If you have specific questions on how that works, you can reach out to the school and we can give you more information on that as well. So several different ways that you can be up to speed on our various schedules for our activities. One other thing I want to quick mention, and this is very important, especially as we get towards the winter and in particular the spring seasons where weather is certainly a concern. If you want to get short, quick, immediate feedback as to whether there are changes, if there's a question mark of whether the track meet is actually going to happen or not, things of that nature, we have a very active Facebook page, and that information is usually first conveyed that way, because it's very quick and easy for us to make a quick schedule update post and get that out there, and people can share it and spread the word. So if you do not follow GPL on Facebook, and you are on Facebook, I would certainly encourage you, parents in particular, to follow them. If nothing else, we also just have random posts about pictures of daily life. If there's things that are going on, You can kind of keep up to speed on what's going on there, and this is especially useful for dorm parents. So you can see your kids and the things that they're doing on a rather regular basis. So our Facebook page is certainly a good place to look for some of that information. All right, next, Panther Gear. Once again, we will be using an online store. That link should be available very shortly, and we'll be sending that out. The online store that we are using again this year is a local place in town, but they are able to ship and deliver the items that you purchase right to your home. So whether you are local or whether you are a dorm parent, that's a very nice option to have. So that information should be coming out quite shortly. If you're looking for specific things for a sport, so if your child is involved in one of our activities and you want to get something that's more specific to, say, Panther volleyball or Panther football or whatnot, the best way to go through that is to talk to the head coaches of each sport, because they have more of a feel for what their plan is for those types of things. The online store that I referenced earlier is more generic stuff with our school logos and things of that nature. Once again this year, GPL is going to be providing one 20-punch event pass for you to use, whatever your preferred activities to attend are. It's just a sign of goodwill and thankfulness that you're part of our ministry, and just a small gesture that we can make to offset some of the admission costs. Of course, these event passes are only good for our home events, so keep that in mind as you look to use those. A couple other things just to be aware of as well, parents. Hopefully you are aware that our first day of school on Monday, August 23rd, is Picture Day. The students will be getting their school pictures taken in the morning, but we are also going to be taking our sports pictures that afternoon. So for all of our activities, cross country, football, volleyball, they will be they will be getting their pictures taken after school. So uniforms will be distributed the week before, and they'll be ready to get those pictures taken on the first day of school as well. So order forms, if order forms were sent in July in the packet that you should have received, if you do not have that form and you need another one, tell your child to talk to the office or talk to their head coach in advance so that those order forms can be filled out and prepared for Picture Day. GPL provides transportation to all of our activities to and from, and one of our newer things that we have implemented that's been very successful is the transportation permission form. There may be situations where it just makes more sense for you to take your child from an event back home. Maybe that's a football game on a Friday night where the game is closer to your house and it doesn't make a lot of sense to drive back to Watertown and then all the way home. And it's certainly more than fine for you to take your child back. All we ask is that you talk to the coach and or the bus driver and fill out the transportation form, easy for me to say. That's just a paper trail that we have releasing us from our obligation to bring your child back. So please be aware of what your coaches expect with that. Certain activities prefer that gets filled out a little bit in advance. There's no surprises, but just communicate with your head coaches and make sure that that's getting done. As I said, we've been doing this for a little bit now, and that's been a good thing. Another service that we're going to continue to provide is live streaming all of our home events. Once again, we'll have gym access for our live stream as well as at the Watertown Stadium for our home football games. So whether you are on the road, whether you live far away, or even if you're gone and you want to watch it later, the games are archived on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search Great Plains Lutheran High School, and you can see those activities. And the last thing I'll say here real quick is, for all of you parents, especially those of you that are local, one of the big things we always look to have is a fully functioning concession stand with enough helpers to make sure it functions well. This is more of a issue when it comes to basketball games in the winter and volleyball games in the fall. And so I would just ask if you are around and if you would like to help us out. Mrs. Miller in the office has a sign-up genius that should be able to be accessed through our school website, gplhs.org, and it's an opportunity to fill in the slots as needed. I will say over the years, It seems like we've done a pretty good job in the last minute to find people, but it would be nicer if we knew a little bit more in advance, if people were able to man the different shifts, especially for some of the longer basketball games in the winter. So something to keep in mind. Or if you're a farther away parent and you're making a trip to Watertown, perhaps that's an opportunity to help our school out in that capacity. It's pretty easy to learn if you're afraid of a learning curve. There's lots of different jobs that you can find your niche for. So if you have any questions about that in particular, I would encourage you to reach out to Mrs. Miller in the office. All right, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some specific things in regards to the athletic handbook. This should have been sent out in the summer as well. In order to stay eligible at GPL, a student must maintain a 2.0 average, that's a C average. They must be complete in all of their courses and passing all of their courses. We check grades about once a month, maybe about every 5 weeks or so. And so those are the things that we will be looking for when it comes to those midterms and end of quarter situations. We will be talking to the students well in advance so that they are aware of when those grade checks are going to be occurring, so that there won't be any surprises, and hopefully the students will be able to meet this benchmark and keep their athletic eligibility going. When it comes to playing time, please understand that different sports require different situations. There's different numbers of players that are on the court at different times or on the field at different times. And depending upon the level of competition, there are different philosophies that our school uses regarding playing time. When it comes to the sub-varsity competitions, whether that's JV teams or C teams, the goal is development. The goal is trying to get playing time for every student. Now, there could be certain circumstances. Maybe there was an issue with conduct at practice. Perhaps a student had missed a lot of time for an illness, etc., that could have an impact on that. But the sub-varsity levels, there's a big focus on playing time. And while playing time may not be equally distributed, that is a goal that our coaches of those levels will try to strive for, is providing playing time as fairly as possible. When it comes to the varsity levels, our goal is to put the most competitive team out there. Sometimes that means certain players get more playing time than others. If you have a question about the playing time of your child, my biggest encouragement would be to find the proper time and place to talk to the head coach about that situation. You can certainly start with me, but my first question to you will be, I'll ask you if you have talked to the head coach, because they are the ones that are in charge of that program. So that would be a good place to start. One other thing I'll just quickly encourage you to think about with this in particular as well is try to have your student athlete start this conversation. That's a big step in growth and maturity, but I think that it's an important one, that they can have that initial conversation with their head coach. From my side of things, I am here to facilitate a conversation if there needs to be something beyond that coach-athlete communication. So certainly you can contact me about that if you have any other questions. The biggest thing is to remember proper communication. There's a proper time, place, and tone for all those things. Shortly after a competition, when emotions are high and things of that nature, not necessarily the proper time to communicate those questions. One of my things that I do encourage our coaches to do is to respond within 24 hours. So if you do email a coach with some of those questions, you should expect to get a response within a day. And if that is not the case, that would be a proper good time to reach out to me and make sure that that line of communication is open. I mentioned the packet that you received this summer. There was a lot of different information in there, some of that regarding athletics. There are some very important forms that came through there that you want to make sure are filled out and returned back to the office. Most importantly is the physical form. Many of our students need to have a new physical done. Last year with COVID, there was a year of grace given to those that needed to do one again. So pretty much at least 3/4 of our student body, I would assume, needs to get a new physical this fall. We must have those physicals done and paperwork turned in before your students can participate, even in any practices. So please make sure that that's happening. If you are a dorm parent and that hasn't happened yet, you can work with the school here, and we can work on getting that done here in Watertown as well. So please just contact us and we can help you out with that. I'll talk more about some concussion stuff later, so I won't touch on that right now. And you can see there's a couple other forms for you to make sure that you fill out before we start the school year as well. Like I said, we'll talk about concussions in a minute. When it comes to COVID, there were lots of different things that happened last year, and I told many people throughout the year, it's great that we have a school that's in South Dakota that had different policies than other states. At least we were able to try to do our best with getting our seasons in, and it certainly was a year that unlike any other, and hopefully we won't have to experience it ever again. So what is the plan for the 2021-2022 school year? Some of these policies come from the state, and some of these policies are going to come and coordinate with our school policies that you have documentation from Principal Bauer, and I'm sure he talked about it in his other videos as well. In the big picture of things, there are a lot less rules and restrictions. There were limitations and restrictions on every aspect of sport last year, from preparing to play, transportation to, conducting the games. There's lots of changes we needed to make. Almost all of those rules are gone for this school year from the state level. They're not mandating that we make these adjustments. I think that there's practically going to be a couple of things that we just implement, because I'm sure you saw this in your life as well. COVID adjustments allowed you to think of things differently, and those different things actually kind of worked out a little bit better. So from our school's perspective, there might be a couple things that we try to do similar to last year, but not specifically just because of rules from the state. In general, our approach to COVID is that we are going to make common sense decisions. We're still going to encourage kids to make good choices when it comes to personal hygiene, and just being smart about where and when they're at, but we're not going to live in fear. We're not going to be uptight and concerned about every type of possible scenario that you can imagine. And that's kind of our approach to how we're going to handle things. So what does that practically look like? Well, there are some regulations that we are going to still be under from the state, but like I said, a lot less than last year. So from the South Dakota High School Activities Association, when a student has a positive test, if they test positive for COVID, the expectation is they are out of competition for 10 days. And we will follow that rule unless that happens to change. As I said, we will reevaluate if the South Dakota Department of Health makes any policy changes. Currently, their policy is positive test, 10 days out of competition. If a student starts to feel better before those 10 days have gone, and they have no more symptoms, they have no more fever, they can return to school, as you will hear from Mr. Bauer. We're going to take the same approach to practices as well. If they are healthy and they are able to be back at school, they certainly can practice. So let's put a scenario out there that it's day 7 and they are healthy, they are back to school, they can resume their normal life. They can practice from days 7 through 10 and then play in competitions from there moving forward. So if you have any specific questions about that, I would encourage you to reach out to me or our school administration, and we can give you a little more guidance on that. And certainly we don't have every type of scenario planned out in our heads, but this is our policy that we're going to run with. And Lord willing, we have a healthy year that we don't need to be too concerned about this with our demographics here in the high school. For a little bit of lingo's sake, perhaps some of you remember last year that we had different tiers for attendance, limiting attendance based on certain COVID situations, and our opponents also use this same tiered system. The plan for us at the high school here, as well as our opponents that we will be traveling to, is to continue to use the tier system so that we have that lingo in place. Tier 1, though, being wide open, everyone can attend, there are no limitations. Tier 4 being the most extreme, where only the athletes are participating and there's nobody watching. The goal, as you can see from the screen here, is that we are Tier 1 all year long. We don't have any limited attendance, and people can make their own decisions on whether or not they come to our activities. So that's our goal, and we pray that God blesses our people and our spectators and our supporters with good health, and that we don't need to ever be talking about any of the other tiers 2 through 4, either for our setting here or for our opponents' places. So that is kind of our COVID plan in a nutshell for this school year. Other items. Shortly, I'm going to switch over to a different PowerPoint presentation slideshow from our trainers. Once again, we have a partnership with Big Stone Therapies here in town that is going to provide athletic training services for our teams throughout the entire year. And I'll talk more about that shortly, as well as their role in concussions. Just briefly, I'll just mention, it is our expectation that we have every student in our student body, whether they're involved in athletics or not, to have a baseline test. That allows us then to retest in the event of a potential concussion, whether that's an athletic injury, whether that's a car crash, whatever life happens to throw at them. It's just a health service provision that we can give, and so all students will be having a current baseline test taken at the beginning of the school year. If a concussion does occur where the impact for the concussion happened in a school-sponsored activity, whether that's in a competition, travel to and from a competition, etc., the school would cover that. If it happens to be outside of those activities, we certainly would still provide the medical service to examine whether a concussion occurred or not, but there would be a $25 charge to cover the cost of the test. That's pretty cheap when it comes to healthcare, in my opinion. So that's just where our school policy on those tests. Speaking of Big Stone Therapy, some information. I'm not going to read all of these different slides for you word for word. You can take a look at them, but I do want to touch on a couple of different things here. So this is, we're getting close to a decade and a half of service to our school with Big Stone Therapies. And Mackenzie Hardy, as you can see pictured on the left of the two ladies there, is the primary trainer who's going to be coming twice a week to see our student athletes that need some medical attention, some screenings, and things of that nature so that they can get back to their activities. Mackenzie has been with us now for about a year and a half, working with our students, and she does a tremendous job. You might see her if you come to some football games. She's often on the sidelines for our home games and things of that nature. So if you are especially a dorm parent, maybe you may not see her as frequently, but if you hear your students say, I went and saw Mackenzie today, this is who that is, and even though she's not a called worker on our staff, she's a vitally important part of our athletic programs. Tricia Riefenberger is the co-owner of Big Stone Therapies and has been working with us also, so that might be another name that you hear every once in a while, but these two ladies, primarily Mackenzie, are going to be part of our athletic training services. They will screen our students a couple different times a week, especially in the fall, Mondays and Wednesdays. And then after a screening, they will give recommendations on what's the next thing to move forward. Are there certain exercises, stretches, is rest the appropriate thing, all with the goal of getting students back to activity as soon and as safely as possible. They specifically want me to mention that they are in the realm of therapy, not so much in sports training, as you might think of a trainer for a professional team or whatever. But they do a tremendous job of being able to discern the differences between sore muscles, because maybe the student athlete is not in as good a shape as they needed to be at the start of a school year, versus a true injury that needs to have some time off as the body recovers. So they do a tremendous job of being able to realize when is the right time to tell a kid to toughen up and get back out there, versus when is it time to take a break and rest and start a recovery plan, depending on the situation. One of the big things that they have a hand in, like I said before, is the concussions. And I coordinate with them And again, we use the computer technology that we have to evaluate the cognitive functioning of their brain, and then with the help of trained doctors, we can then transfer whether there was a concussion diagnosis for an impact injury or not. And our coaches, all of our coaches, head coaches, assistant coaches, are well trained in concussion symptoms, how to identify concussions, and what to do with them. So there's a famous motto that's becoming more and more prevalent in the sports world. When in doubt, sit them out, or as it says there, pull them out. God gives each of our students one brain, and it's so vital that we take care of that brain. Lots of studies have been conducted about what's known as second impact syndrome. If a brain is not properly healed before a second impact and a concussion were to occur. And so, as important as a game might seem to a teenager, a competition might seem to a teenager, it's not nearly as important as their brain and their cognitive functioning. And sometimes that we often need to protect students and athletes from themselves, their desire to tough it out, or things of that nature. So Big Stone Therapies plays a big role in our concussion plan moving forward here. All right, a lot of words on this particular slide. Again, we work closely with Big Stone Therapies. They get to know the student athletes through their time working with us. And they have a very good relationship, I will say, with our head coaches. And how is the best way to communicate the plan moving forward to make sure that the students can return to activities as soon as possible. When it comes to concussions in particular, we do have a plan, a step-by-step plan to get students back to activities. And depending upon the severity of the symptoms, that kind of impacts how fast we progress a student through this plan. But treatment for concussions is a thing that we're well versed in. Unfortunately, high school sports concussions are a rather prevalent thing. And so we work closely with Big Stone Therapies to make sure we're providing proper treatment for students who do suffer a concussion. And here's a list of the rehab progression, from no contact at the very beginning to then trying to get into light activity as we progress towards what we call return to play protocol. And here's the end of that list. So as you can see, it's a rather extensive process before we would clear them to get back into activity. And again, that just is a re-emphasis of the importance of making sure that the brain is fully healed. The hard part of it with the brain injury, like a concussion, is you can't see it. You can see when an ankle is no longer swollen. You can see with an x-ray whether a bone is broken or not. You can't see that with the brain. So making sure that they are symptom-free, that they are ready to return to play by going through our process. And I coordinate that with Big Stone Therapies and the head coach, so everyone's on the same page for when a student is able to healthily return back to activity. Here's the contact information for both Trish and Mackenzie. If you want that, you can take that. Again, another way to reach out to them is through the school, through myself. I can certainly be a liaison for that communication as well. Then finally, from me, a big thank you to all of you for your student athletes, for your dedication to your activities. Parents, specifically to you, for choosing Great Plains Lutheran, for realizing the importance of Christian education. What we get to do here in our ministry is truly special and unique. It's not something that we take for granted, nor is your trust in us. And that's a big thing. If you entrust the children to our care, that the GPL is a tremendous place for God's people, and a place where students can continue to grow in a sinful world, but in an environment surrounded by Christians, whether that's in the classroom, in their activities, things of that nature. So thank you for entrusting your children to our care here at GPL. I'll thank you in advance for your continued support of our student athletes in their activities, whether you're cheering in the stands or watching the games on the live stream or whatever it happens to be. Thank you for supporting them in their various endeavors. So God's blessings to you, God's blessings to our student athletes, God's blessings to our teams as we embark on a new school year here and the school year of 21-22. God's blessings to you, and thanks for watching this video.